Good morning, everybody. My name is Chief Scott Weiss. I'm the police chief here in Monterey Park. I want to welcome everybody today to the Patriots Day celebration in remembrance of everybody who lost their lives 22 years ago in Pennsylvania, in Washington, D.C., and in New York City. To begin the ceremony, I'd like to have the Monterey Park Police Department Color Guard present the colors. If everybody could please stand.
Left, right, left, left. Honor guard, ho! Honor guard, left, face. Honor guard, present, arms.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor guard, order, arms. Outward, face. Forward, move. Honor guard, prepare to post colors. Post. Colors. Honor guard, present, arms. Order, arms. Outward, face. Forward, march. Left, 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 right, left, left,
I would now like to ask representatives of the Monterey Park Police Department and Monterey Park Fire Department to place the memorial wreath. The wreath is in remembrance of all those who perished as a result of the tragic events on September 11th, 2001. Please be seated. I'd like to introduce some of our honored guests here today and ask them to come up and say a few words. First is our mayor, Jose Sanchez, our mayor pro tem, Thomas Wong, council member Vin Go, council member Yvonne Yu, council member Henry Lowe, our city clerk, Michelle Yee, and city treasurer, Amy Lee. Now I'd like to ask Mayor Sanchez to come up.
Good morning. I first want to start off by thanking everyone for being here this morning, and once again to honor those nearly 3,000 souls who perished 22 years ago, but who continue to live in our collective memory. Scripture tells us that we count as blessed those who have persevered. It was hard to imagine that this morning, when I was thinking about this, that it's been 22 years. 22 years since the peace was broken in that morning. 22 years of moments that these 3,000 victims would have shared with us and their families. 22 years of memories that they would have made with us, made with their families, made with their communities. And yet their memory and the memory of that day is still with us. Many of us remember very vividly that morning and what happened on that day. I was a junior at Occidental College, and my roommates woke me up to the tragedy of that news. I ran down to the dorm lobby because I didn't have a TV to watch on the television the news in disbelief. Just a week before this tragedy, I had actually spent the summer studying on the East Coast, and on my last day there, I went into the city, took the train on my last day, and do what sightseers do. Went to the Statue of Liberty, went to Battery Park, but I also went to the World Trade Center. And I still vividly remember, this was only 3 weeks before the tragedy occurred, I still remember sitting in that courtyard, listening to the music in the loudspeakers that was in that area. I remember people walking in a frenzy trying to get to work, trying to get to lunch. For people like myself who were tourists, I remember that entering the lobby, in the foyer, and the first thing that struck me when I was there at the World Trade Center was the many flags that were there present, representing all of the different countries around the world. I was there with my friend Vlad, who had spent the summer studying. He was from the Ukraine. And we took a large elevator all the way to the top with many other tourists. I can't remember, I would say at least 50 people or more. And when we got up there, it had some of the most beautiful views of Manhattan. Today, that picture of myself and Vlad at top of the World Trade Center that we took sits in my classroom. And later this morning, I will be sharing this story and that picture with my students. You see, America endures in that perennial optimism and collective memory that defines us as people. Most of my students are teenagers, and I know there's might be some teenagers here with us today, young adults who were born after this 9/11 tragedy. And it's remarkable that most of us here today so vividly remember these tragedies, but these other generations don't. They were born after this, and they rely on us for those stories. Lastly, 22 years ago, we were awakened by tragedy, and that morning, we were full of emotions, of disbelief and fear. Those hateful minds that conspired to break us did actually quite the opposite. They made us stronger in our values, stronger in resolve, and stronger as an American people. Generations from now, even those young adults, the ones that I will teach later this morning, that have no collective memory of 9/11, will continue to build on that American creed of freedom, creed of liberty, and will continue to fight in their own ways for these values regardless of any hardship, tragedy, or obstacle that is placed in front of us. And us here in Monterey Park know what tragedy feels like, and we know what resiliency it looks like as well. Generations from now, no matter the trial, no matter the challenge, whether here in Monterey Park or throughout our country, America will always be America because we count as blessed those who have persevered. I want to end by thanking our servicemen here and throughout our country and throughout the world, our police officers and firemen, and all of our first responders that keep us safe, because in doing so, you keep America safe. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.
I'd like to introduce
this event and helping to organize this for 22 years now to help make sure that the collective memory, as the mayor was mentioning, of this tragic event does not fade from our memories despite the passage of time. And just to echo what the mayor said as well, I was getting ready for school as well that morning, turned on the news to kind of just see what was going on before we headed out. And at that time, right, the first tower had been hit. We did not know what was going on. I think most of the news coverage was that it was an accident. And when the second plane hit, it was clear it was not an accident, but an attack on America and our kind of community. And in many ways, right, as we've had time to reflect on this, in many ways that attack in 9/11 was an attack on what America's values are and our community's values, and what attracts many immigrant families like those here in Monterey Park and across the country that draws so many to America, right? The ideals of hope, of opportunity, of justice, of equality. And though we continue to strive for those values and for a more perfect union, that those values were under attack and brought many of us here in the United States and here in Monterey Park together to come together as a community to provide support for each other and to, as the mayor pointed out, to prove our resilience in the face of these challenges. And we come together today on 9/11 on this anniversary to remember not only those who have been lost, the nearly 3,000 lives that day, but the many thousands and tens of thousands that have been continued to bear those scars, both physically and emotionally and spiritually, to continue to commit ourselves as a community and as Americans, fellow Americans, to provide support for those who have been impacted by this tragedy, and to continue to remember the lessons that we learned from this tragedy, that we can come together, that we can and we will rise to the challenges that are ahead of us, and that we will continue to come together as a community to provide support for each other and to close ranks when we need to, and to make sure that we can get through all the challenges that are coming and that face us. And so thank you so much to the community and to the city staff and others who continue to show up to address the challenges that our community faces, including keeping our community safe from these threats, both abroad and here locally, and count on our commitment as a city council and as leaders in the community to continue to bring the community together to face these challenges together, because that's the only way we will succeed. So thank you so much again for hosting this, and I'll hand this back to the chief.
Before I ask the other council members to come up, we all remember moments in time. We're rapidly approaching a moment in time. At 8:46 a.m., the first plane struck the World Trade Center. As we approach 8:46 a.m., all of us can remember where we were that day. I was asleep upstairs in the police station after working graveyard shift and was woken up by day watch officers and told to come and watch TV. And I sat in briefing with the other members of the SWAT team, and we watched the second plane strike the tower. We didn't know what was going to happen at that point. We didn't know if we were going to war. We didn't know if we needed to head over to downtown LA. We didn't know what was happening. But all of us were scared. All of us were wondering what was going to happen. And that was a moment in time for me. And right now at 8:46, I'd like everybody to take a moment of silence and remember the people that died when that first plane hit the World Trade Center. Thank you. I'd like to introduce City Council Member Vingo.
Good morning, everyone. Patriot Day, we've always celebrated that in U.S. soil, whether it was the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and most recently, 9/11. It's just a day for us to remember about American unity, the healing, the strength that we get through. 22 years ago, I remember that day because I had just come back from the hospital. My daughter was born about 10 days before, and I spent the last 5 nights in the hospital. We had to be back in the hospital. I got up at 5:40, was ready to go back to work, turn on the news. It's like, what is this about? We all lived through it, or many of us did. But the bottom line is, we in the U.S., we have a resiliency. We're built on hope. We're built on strength. No matter what happens, we get through it. So as we celebrate Patriot Day, as we remember the nearly 3,000 victims and the hundreds and thousands of volunteers, and of course, our first responders, fire, police, civic workers, who came and helped and became our aid and gave us strength and unity within our nation. We'll always remember that. Fast forward to January of this year, we had a similar event here in our city. We get through all these events because we as Americans are strong, resilient, and we are united. Just remember that thought. We always get through things, but we always go back and remember and cherish the memories we have. Thank you, everyone.
Now I'd like to introduce Councilmember Yvonne Yu.
Hello, everyone. This is Yvonne Yu, Councilwoman of City of Monterey Park. On this Patriot Day, we gather to remember all the victims from 9/11 terrorist attack. 22 years ago, I still remember the day that actually a few years back, I was supposed to accept a job offer at Morgan Stanley at World Trade Center, but I declined the offer because I really miss my family in California. So I was the lucky one. But 3,000 innocent people were killed. But on the other hand, we see the best in humanity. We saw firefighters, we saw police officers rush into the scene to save lives. And a lot of ordinary citizens came together to help their neighbors. 9/11 attack is a test to our nation. But we did not break. We united. We come together stronger than ever before. And today, we honor the memory of all the victims. And we pledge to defend our freedom and our democracy. And we pledge to never forget. Thank you. God bless America.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Councilmember Henry Lowe.
Thank you, Chief Weiss. You know, I think for many of us, days like today is one of contemplation about where we were at the time of 9/11, what we were doing, and what we were thinking, and what were our emotions. And I know for myself, although it's been 22 years, it's still very vivid to me, the event of 9/11. I was at home, also in bed, and I remember my phone started ringing. Texts were coming in rapid succession. I thought, what's going on? And it was not until I turned on TV that I realized something awful had happened. And I was in shock and disbelief that this was happening to our country. What I also remember was, seeing people fleeing from the building as it was on fire, as it was about to collapse. First responders who were running towards the building to save those who could be rescued. And just people's raw emotions, their sheer terror. We saw probably in that day the worst of humanity, but the best in humanity, as people were rushing to rescue those from the building before it collapsed. I also remember going to work that day. At the time, I was a staffer for California State Senator Gloria Romero. And, as I went to work, as all public servants do, what I also remember that morning were the phone calls coming in. People were asking, what can we do to help the people who experienced this awful tragedy of 9/11. But I also remember, unfortunately, picking up phone calls from people who were saying awful things, saying, this is what happens when we allow too many immigrants into our country. This is what happens when we allow Muslims into our country. And for someone who, like everyone else, was just dealing with the emotions that morning, to also hear that degree of xenophobia coming from residents of our own community, it was disheartening. But what I also remember in the aftermath of 9/11 were also the vigils that took place in this community in Southern California. Across the country, Americans of different ethnicities, of different religions, of different backgrounds, coming together to show solidarity, to show support for this nation, to show support for the first responders, to remember those lives lost. To me, that also represented the best as Americans, what we all embody in our values as Americans. And terrorists, because they're cowards, they exercise violence with the goal of dividing us, with the goal of cowering us, the goal of trying to make us doubt. And what was really also a proud moment for me as an American, it was that we showed these cowards, these terrorists, that we were not, as a nation, going to be scared. We, as a nation, we were going to stand tall and proud. And I think that is what is unique about America and about Americans and the values we hold dear, and what brings us to a place like America. And I think that with each crisis that we experience, which we have through the years, and so on our own community this year, we have demonstrated time and time again as America, as Americans, that our diversity is what makes us strong. And as Americans, we all come from all over the world, all walks of life, with the same values. And that is what sustained us as a nation and what has seen us through the tragedy of 9/11, why 22 years later, we continue to gather so that we don't forget. And we are pledged ourselves as Americans to continue to live by our values, to show the world what America is all about. So thank you so much, and thank you all of you, many of you who I've seen come year after year, for coming back for 22 years to remember and to never forget. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask our city treasurer, Amy Lee, to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Chief Weiss. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Lee. I'm the City Treasurer of Monterey Park. I'd like to thank everyone that's here today to commemorate and remember 9/11. The truth is, we really cannot forget. I can't forget. We don't need to remember because we cannot forget. It is ingrained in our memories where we were at, what we were doing. What I wanted to talk about today is to thank all the law enforcement, first responders, fire, nurses, doctors, everyone that came together after 9/11. They banded together and many sacrificed their lives to save one another. We must remember what they gave up, what they sacrificed, and the bravery they had. Going forward, we need to remember to support our law enforcement, our fire, our first responders, the doctors, and the nurses. We need to gather together. If they need help, we need to be there for them. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and let us not forget.
This year, as we honor all those who lost their lives in the heartbreaking attacks of September 11th, and you can see that our first responders are always on call. And all who made the ultimate sacrifice in the years that followed. Staff from the fire department, unfortunately he left and went on an emergency call, and the police department have selected a fallen first responder and will share their story in commemorance of Patriots Day. At this point, I'd like to introduce Officer Sandy Castillo, one of my police officers and also a current member of the United States Air Force.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Officer Sandy Castillo from the Monterey Park Police Department, and as the Chief stated, is that better? Okay. I am a current member of the United States Air Force Reserve. I remember this day clearly. I was asleep at home, about 8 months pregnant, and my ex-husband's friend called and said, "Turn on the television. You can't believe what just happened." Turn on the television and we see the first tower, and then we see the second aircraft hit the second tower. Moments later, the home phone rings, and we were living with my mother-in-law. She comes to our bedroom, knocks on the door, and she says, "Mijo, it's for you. They're asking for Sergeant Castillo." So he goes to the phone, answers it, And he at the time was in the Army Reserve. And he comes to the bedroom and he said, "Hey Sandy, it's for you." So I answer the phone and it was for me. It was, "You're all on standby." I said, "I'm 8 months pregnant." They said, "We understand that, but we're going to need all the support that we can get, so you're on standby. Let your department know." At the time, I was an employee here also of the Monterey Park Police Department. And it was, like the chief said, it was total chaos. Everybody was wondering what was going on. I mentioned the first part of the story because when my mother-in-law found out that it was for me and not for him, her first response was, "Oh, thank God that it's not him." And I said, "I'm 8 months pregnant." Okay. So that's just the memory that I have, and that's how sometimes I remember how old my daughter is. She's 22 years old. With that said, we came together as a community. We were here for citizens, and I was ready also to be deployed locally until I gave birth. What I will read now is the story of one of the officers. On the morning of September 11th, 22 officers from a total of 8 local, state, and federal agencies were killed when terrorist hijackers working for the Al-Qaeda terrorist network headed by Osama bin Laden crashed 4 hijacked planes into the World Trade Center towers in New York City, the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, and a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. After the impact of the first plane into the World Trade Center's North Tower, putting the safety of others before their own, law enforcement officers, along with fire and EMS personnel, rushed to the burning twin towers of the World Trade Center to aid the victims and lead them to safety. Due to their quick actions, it is estimated that over 25,000 people were saved. One of those officers was Officer John W. Perry. Officer Perry was not your typical officer. He spoke French, Spanish, Swedish, Russian, and was learning Albanian. He was a graduate of the New York University School of Law. He ran in 3 marathons and took part in a swim around Manhattan. He was an extra in Woody Allen films. He volunteered 1 day a week for the Kings County Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. He was in the New York State Guard and was a board member in the New York Civil Liberties Union. He collected bulletproof vests from retired police officers and gave them to officers in Moscow. On the morning of September 11th, Officer Perry was filing his retirement papers at one police plaza, intent on becoming a medical malpractice lawyer. When he learned of the first of the attacks, he ran a few blocks to the World Trade Center. Colleagues said he disappeared in the rubble when the South Tower collapsed, just moments after he tried to help a woman who had fainted. Officer Perry had been employed with the New York City Police Department for 8 years and is survived by his parents, brother, and sister. Officer Perry was posthumously awarded the New York City Police Department's Medal of Honor for his heroic actions. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce our fire chief, Matt Halleck. Yeah, he can come in after you. Okay. They can drop him off at the corner.
Our speaker from the fire department is just getting back, so, but I'll say this and I'll let him come up. Hopefully he'll be back real quick. I was going to say in his absence, I didn't have an opportunity to research a member of the fire department, but there was somebody there that always resonates with me in my memory of this incident, and that's the pastor of the New York Fire Department, Father Michael Judge. And if you haven't seen that image, I'm sure most of you have, is him being carried out of the rubble following one of the collapses of the towers. He doesn't wear turnouts, he doesn't wear a helmet, he doesn't wear a breathing apparatus, he wears a cross. And he was there that day to provide emotional support and spiritual support for those first responders that rushed into those buildings, and he died doing his duty. So that is something that will always resonate with me, is his heroism in doing his job of providing spiritual support to members of the fire department. So I'll go ahead and continue on with the ceremony, and then maybe we'll continue with Engineer Getz when he gets back. But we will close our time of remembrance with a fire service tradition that dates back to the mid-1800s. Long before there were radios or cell phones, fire alarms and daily announcements were sent from headquarters to firehouses by a system of bell commands and telegraph announcements. When a firefighter died in the line of duty, headquarters would transmit in a series of 4 with 5 bell strikes each. This custom has continued through the years to this day. It is a form of rendering final honors to departed comrades. In the fire service, this is known as the striking of the 4 5s. I would like to ask everyone to please rise for the striking of the 4 5s by Monterey Park firefighter paramedic Paul Kang. I'd like to introduce Fire Engineer David Getz to provide his words.
Morning. When asked to speak today, I thought not only was it a privilege and an honor, but also the daunting task of finding someone to talk about. Of course, not as daunting as what the 343 and many others faced on that fateful day, September 11, 2001. I started with pulling up a list of fallen firefighters and going through each one to see who had a remarkable story to tell, and as be it, they all did. Well, I found one that resonated most with me, and that was the story of David Arce of Engine 33. He was 36 in 2001, not far off of myself, and he had wanted to be a firefighter from an early age, playing with toy fire trucks. Around the station, he was nicknamed the Buddha because his purpose in life was to aid and to serve others. After his passing, his mother went to clear out his apartment. What she found broke her all over again, as within his apartment he had letters and toys from children for their Christmas needs to Santa, and he had been buying toys on his own to give them. Now, here's the truly remarkable part. The morning of September 11th, he had worked the night shift and was off duty. Then the first tower was struck, and instead of thinking that his shift was over and he got his gear, he hopped on the rig and set off to work with his fire family to help those that needed it most. This isn't an act that you see in just the brave men of the 343, but right here in Monterey Park. On the tragic night of the shooting here in Monterey Park, we had firefighter Dominic Garcia, who had worked extra staffing on Saturday for the Lunar New Year celebration and was spending the night because he was going to be working extra staffing the next day. But when the tones in the station went off of what would come to be a mass shooting, he thought not of being off duty, but of those that he could help with extra firefighters on scene. What was true of the FDNY members, what's true of Monterey Park Fire, what's true of all fire departments out there is that the sense of danger will not stop us when there are people in need and we can make a difference. Thank you.
Okay, please have a seat. Okay, this concludes our 9/11 Patriot Day ceremony. I want to thank everybody who showed up today to remember those that gave the ultimate sacrifice. I want to thank all the speakers that were here today. And we'll go ahead and conclude our ceremony with University of California Riverside bagpipe player Luke Loader. Thank you.
This concludes our ceremony. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Have a wonderful day.